Originally owned by Rex Raptor before being passed on to Joey Wheeler, Red-Eyes is one of the most recognizable monsters from the original Yu-Gi-Oh!, and similar to its second owner, it's a massive underdog. For as much support as it's received in the TCG, the deck is nearly unplayable, and in addition, it seems to clearly be an afterthought to Konami, with other legacy strategies receiving a lot more love. In this video, we're going to look at the good and bad elements of the deck, where it could be going in the future, and some reasons as to why Konami has seemingly given up on Red-Eyes. Red-Eyes is in a very strange spot in my opinion, as the deck is definitely horrible, but on the other hand, there are a couple of cards that are bordering playable or are actually playable. Black Metal Dragon can search the entire archetype when it's sent from the field to the graveyard, and isn't once per turn. Blackstone of Legend can summon almost any monster in the archetype from the deck. Red-Eyes Insight can search all the spell and traps. Dragoon is Dragoon. Red-Eyes Fang with Chain is a strong piece of interaction. Red-Eyes Black Meteor Dragon can summon itself by dumping the vanilla to the graveyard, and can banish itself from the graveyard to search Red-Eyes Fusion, and Red-Eyes Fusion is a card we'll discuss in depth later. But this deck seemingly has all the ingredients of a successful modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategy, but it doesn't quite click. Red-Eyes almost has the opposite problem of Dark Magician. Instead of lacking an identity, it seems to have three distinct ones, and none of them are particularly strong. These three identities are burn damage, Gemini monsters, and equip monsters. You also have the zombie side plot, but those cards don't really tie into the overarching strategy. First, we'll look at the burn damage aspect of the deck. Going all the way back to Red-Eye Signature Attack, Inferno Fire Blast, which was released in 2004, this deck has always featured some sort of burn element. This card says, target one Red-Eyes Black Dragon in your monster zone, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the original attack of that Red-Eyes Black Dragon. Red-Eyes Black Dragon cannot attack the turn you activate this card. This card saw little to no play outside of an inconsistent FTK strategy featuring Serial Spell, which could copy the effect of Inferno Fire Blast after its activation. Konami continued this trend with cards like Archfiend Black Skull Dragon and Meteor Black Comet Dragon, which were retrains of older Red-Eyes Fusion monsters. These cards are significant as they coincide with the release of Red-Eyes Fusion. This is probably the most polarizing card in the archetype, as it's incredibly powerful but has one of the worst restrictions printed on any card. It says, fusion summon one fusion monster that lists Red-Eyes monsters as material from the extra deck using monsters from your hand, deck, or field as fusion material. And if you do, its name becomes Red-Eyes Black Dragon. You cannot normal or special summon other monsters the turn you activate this effect. Being able to turbo out Dragoon is great, but the cost of not summoning for the turn is insane. And just to be clear, the turn you activate this effect is different from the rest of the turn. If you activate Red-Eyes Fusion, you cannot summon that turn, and if you summon, you cannot activate Red-Eyes Fusion that turn. This is made even worse when you consider the fact that Shaddoll Fusion, which lets you use monsters from the deck as material if your opponent controlled an extra deck monster, was released 2 years prior in 2014. It creates a strange scenario where you have to play it in the deck because it gives you access to your entire fusion lineup, as well as being the only fusion spell in the deck, but it kills any combo potential. Another burn-centric card in the archetype is Red-Eyes Flare Metal Dragon. This is just a good card. It can protect itself, summon Red-Eyes from the grave, and most importantly, it burns their opponent for 500 damage each time they activate a card or effect. And those can add up, especially when you have 2 or 3 on the field. The last burn card that I'd like to mention is Red-Eyes Black Flare Dragon, which says, if damage calculation is performed involving this card at the end of the battle phase, you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to this card's original attack. Flare Metal Dragon also has another bit of text, which leads us to our next identity. The first part of this card's effect reads, this card is treated as a normal monster while face up on the field or in the graveyard. While this card is a normal monster on the field, you can normal summon it to have it become an effect monster with this effect. You have to summon this card twice to get its effect, and the effect isn't really that good. I don't want to crap on the Gemini mechanic because it's an interesting mechanic and has seen some success throughout history, but the game has evolved and this mechanic has probably aged worse than anything else. Even Spirits and Unions have found ways to be relevant in modern formats. In addition to Flare Dragon, we received Meteor Dragon Red-Eyes Impact, a retrain of Meteor Dragon, and Red-Eyes Archfiend of Lightning, a retrain of Summon Skull. Meteor Dragon, when it gained its effect, protects your other Red-Eyes monsters from being destroyed by battle or card effects, and Archfiend could destroy all monsters your opponent controls whose defense was less than its original attack. These are actually decent effects, and they'd be decent cards if they weren't Geminis. And also, you can't really just give a deck Gemini support. You kind of have to support the mechanic to make it good, and Konami kind of just chose not to do that. Red-Eyes Retro Dragon does give you an additional normal summon, but the cost of tributing itself, and the Gemini monsters are level 6 and 7, so it's only really helpful if they're already on the field. Overall, this was a cute idea, but executed about as terribly as possible. Finally, the equip stuff is the most recent wave of support for the deck. There is the Metal Morph stuff, but I consider it to be its own deck, but I will touch on that later. All of these cards were released in Legendary Duelists in September of 2017, and it's probably best to start off with Red-Eyes Baby Dragon, which was a reference to the original Baby Dragon card. Its effect reads, when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one level 7 or lower Red-Eyes monster from your deck, and if you do, equip this card from the graveyard to it. It gains 300 attack. If this card is sent to the graveyard while equipped to a monster, you can add one level 1 dragon monster from your deck to your hand. This card is almost pretty good. It floats, its effects feed into each other, but in 2017, being required to be destroyed by battle was a bit slow. But I think the idea was that you crash this into your opponent's monster, then attack again with the monster summoned from the deck. And the second effect to search is obviously meant for Black Metal Dragon, which could equip itself from the hand. Overall, a decent card. Next is Gearfried the Red-Eyes Iron Knight. Once per turn, if either player equips an equip card to this card, you can destroy those equip cards, then destroy one spell and trap card your opponent controls. Once per turn, you can send one equip card you control that is equipped to this card to the graveyard, then target one level 7 or lower Red-Eyes monster in your graveyard, special summon it. This card is also decent, but a bit worse than the previous one though. It sends the equip card to the graveyard to pop spell or trap, or summon Red-Eyes from the graveyard, but it requires a little more setup than the Baby Dragon, but offers some different utility. Following that is Red-Eyes Fang with Chain, which I mentioned previously is one of the better cards. It can equip itself to a Red-Eyes monster and then later send itself to the graveyard to equip an opponent's monster to one of yours. It's a great interruption, and it's one that holds up really well. And to tie everything together was the new fusion monster, Red-Eyes Slash Dragon. It requires Red-Eyes Black Dragon and one warrior monster. Its effect reads, when a Red-Eyes monster declares an attack, you can target one warrior monster in your graveyard. Equip it to this card as an equip spell that gives it 200 attack. When a card or effect is activated that targets a card you control, quick effect, you can send one equip card you control to the graveyard. Negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon as many monsters from your graveyard as possible that were equipped to this card. Slash Dragon negates, floats, and advances the equip strategy. It was actually a great boss monster for this wave. The only criticism would be requiring a warrior instead of another Red-Eyes monster. You can basically only make it with Gearfried unless you play other random warrior monsters. So what's the issue with these cards? I didn't really say anything bad about them because there isn't really anything negative to say. The strategy was cohesive and it aimed to take advantage of Black Metal Dragon, which is the best card in the deck. The problem really circles back around to Red-Eyes Fusion. Now to be fair, it does actually synergize with Slash Dragon, as you can equip the Gearfried you sent to the graveyard with Fusion, but that lock prevents you from making the most of the new main deck monsters. For a period like 2017 where decks were a little slower, it may have been okay to crash with Baby Dragon to set up Red-Eyes Fusion for the following turn, but you're kind of telegraphing your play a bit. The Metamorph stuff is really good. Full Metal Dragon is very easy to summon, it is an Omni-Negate, and you can access the engine through Black Metal Dragon, but it doesn't really have much to do with Red-Eyes, although it's probably the best version of the deck to play currently. Lord of the Red is also a bit of a weird one. This card's actually very good. Its effect says, you can ritual summon this card with Red-Eyes Transmigration. Once per turn, when a card or effect is activated except Lord of the Red, you can target one monster on the field, destroy it. Once per turn, when a card or effect is activated except Lord of the Red, quick effect, you can target one spell or trap on the field, destroy it. And the ritual spell Red-Eyes Transmigration, being able to banish Red-Eyes monsters from your graveyard as material, makes it even better. But the deck just isn't really equipped to take advantage of the ritual mechanic. In addition, Lord of the Red not being a Red-Eyes monster hurts a little, as it's not searchable within the archetype. Finally, my favorite, Red-Eyes Alternative Black Dragon. You may be familiar with the similarly named Blue-Eyes Alternative White Dragon, and assume it's good because that card was good, but it's not. First, instead of revealing a monster to summon it, you have to tribute a monster from your hand or field. Then instead of destroying a monster on the field, its effect activates when it's destroyed, summoning a Red-Eyes monster from your graveyard. Being honest, the effect isn't that terrible, but it's reactive as opposed to proactive, and there's really no excuse for this card to be worse than its counterpart as it was released later. So where does Red-Eyes go in the future? We don't really know. There isn't any new support on the horizon, and it seems like the Metamorph cards we're all working to get for a while. But I envision a couple directions that the deck could take. One, a strategy that makes the most of Red-Eyes Fusion's limitations, allowing you to spam the board on your opponent's turn. The card that made me think of this is Red-Eyes Soul. This card says, this card's name becomes Red-Eyes Black Dragon while on the field or in the graveyard. If your opponent special summons a monster, you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard. Special summon Red-Eyes monster from your hand or deck. Quick effect, you can target one Red-Eyes Black Dragon you control, inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's original attack. Reading this card initially, I was very confused. It summons itself, but it's unlikely that it'll be on your turn, and the effect felt random. But if you think about it in tandem with Red-Eyes Fusion, it becomes a little more obvious. You make something like Meteor Black Comet Dragon with Red-Eyes Fusion. Its name is treated as Red-Eyes Black Dragon because of Fusion. You burn your opponent with its effect, then you burn your opponent again on their turn with Soul. I think that was the intent. I think the second way to get something out of Red-Eyes Fusion would be a Red-Eyes card that copies the effect, similar to Vertanaconda, allowing players to bypass the summoning restriction. And finally, the third direction I think they could take, which is maybe the most boring, is a more Xyz and Link focused strategy. Black Metal Dragon is already used in Dragon Link, and the deck is decent at summoning level 7s, so it seems like a natural trajectory. I can only think of a few explanations as to why Red-Eyes seemingly doesn't get as much support from Konami. One, they might be worried about the potential of the deck. This seems pretty comical, as the deck is pretty bad, and I've spent this entire video explaining why it's bad, but there are a few cards in the deck kind of just waiting to be exploited. As mentioned before, Blackstone of Legend and Black Metal Dragon are super powerful, but it would only take one or two new cards to push them over the edge. But I don't really buy this. Konami obviously doesn't care about the power level of decks, and both these cards kind of have ceilings, as they can't be searched within the archetype, as they themselves do not have Red-Eyes in their name. A slightly more likely explanation might be that Red-Eyes is just not as profitable or marketable as other monsters. I don't have any metrics or data to prove this, but you can kind of just look at how hard they push other decks in Legacy support. Think about Blue Eyes, Dark Magician, Heroes, Cyber Dragons, and even Blackwings. They all get a lot more love than Red-Eyes. And the third explanation is that maybe someone at Konami just hates Red-Eyes. Not only are most of these cards bad, they don't really mesh with each other, as each wave is attempting to do something drastically different. The only unifying trait is that a lot of these cards send the original Red-Eyes to the graveyard. Also, looking at the playstyles and mechanics they chose for these cards, Burn, Gemini, and Equip cards are kind of just weird choices. That's the video. If you enjoyed it, like the video, consider subscribing to the channel, and comment what you think about Red-Eyes as an archetype. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video.